Hello, I think we're live. I'm just gonna wait for some people to trickle in and give my thoughts about the debate I had with Hypocrite on Monday. For those of you who saw it, and I've already gotten some feedback from people who say that they watched the debate after it was after it had been uploaded. It's on his second channel, so it's gotten significantly fewer views than an ordinary video, and that's one of the things that's one of the issues that I want to address. the the fact that it was streamed from his second channel rather than his main lends some credence to my original point, namely the idea that he well, first of all, he's not willing to stick up. He's not willing to stand behind his principles, but also his idea, and this was bolstered in a tweet thread that was subsequently posted by him. He's his belief that everyone is similarly uh, timorous. This idea that everyone operates along the same principles, namely, if it involves some costly sacrifice, then you're simply going to yield. You're not going to fight. That idea is, and I think I demonstrated this during the debate, that idea is simply incorrect. And in the Twitter thread, the tweet thread, he repeatedly saying that no one's willing to be a martyr. No one's willing. Being a martyr equates to giving up your job or having a lower quality of life. Giving up anything that's valuable to you is, from his perspective, being a martyr. And his point of view is that no one's willing to, or very few people are willing to do that, and that's why you see so much compliance with the vaccine mandate. And I made this point during the debate, and I think I'll reemphasize it here. That's simply him projecting his his philosophy onto other people. And in the tweet thread, he makes a very very unpersuasive argument that this isn't cowardice. It's not temporizing. It's not compromising your principles in order not to be not to have burdens placed upon you that otherwise wouldn't exist. That's not what he's doing. He's simply strategically plotting his his uh, his fight against the system. And I think one of the words he uses repeatedly in his streams is cope, or coping. And I don't want to be unkind towards him, uncharitable, but I think that's what he's doing in this circumstance. He's coping. He's making some post hoc justifications for compromising his principles, or his ostensible principles, his ethics, in order to in order to not be to not sacrifice something that's valuable to him. And the things that are valuable to him, it's not simply a matter of preserving his family or preserving his job. Something like YouTube monetization or keeping his channel on YouTube, that's, to him, that's worth that's worth sacrificing his principles. And a great illustration of this is the fact that stream, as I said, was uploaded to his secondary channel. Instead of uploading the stream to his main channel, where he would have gotten thousands upon thousands of views, which is very popular, he decided to upload it to a channel that most of his subscribers aren't even aware of. much less follow avidly, and would go there if they were cognizant of a debate. Hey, Alejandro, good to see you here. So he decided to live stream it from a channel where 90% of his subscribers, of which 90% of his subscribers are unaware. That's what he decided to do. So instead of having thousands upon thousands of, yeah, that's a good idea for those of you who were willing to take the time. Yeah, you could download the debate. It's on iHypocrite 2, a 2TOO. It's on that channel. So he live streamed it from a channel that most of his subscribers would not be aware of. So instead of having thousands or tens of thousands of views, it would be watched by a few hundred people. And I think as of this stream, it's been watched by a little over 500 people. So, and the reason he did that, it's very simple. The reason he did that is because if he would incur the wrath of YouTube if he had someone on his show who was skeptical of the vaccine mandates, who was pushing back against this narrative. So the the pro-vaccine video, the militantly pro-vaccine video where he justified this and made petty comments about the critics of the criticisms he had received on Twitter and other social media platforms. That video was on his main channel, which would be widely viewed and which would be widely disseminated. The video where he gave half of his time to a critic of the vaccine mandates was live streamed from a channel that no one or very few people would watch, and that wouldn't incur the wrath of the YouTube Trust and Safety Council, the YouTube censors. So I mean, that gives you a good, and I stand corrected if this is not the reason he did this. If there were simply logistical reasons why he had to stream it on a channel that he knew very. Yeah, I mean, it could have been because he was a poor debater, or he is a poor debater. That could have been another reason. There could be a multitude of reasons, but I think it was because he didn't want to be demonetized or be deplatformed by YouTube. And so the idea that he's putting forward, that this is simply a sacrifice for something very important to him, I have to be skeptical of that. If you're not willing, and I also have to be skeptical of the idea that he's doing this as part of some deeper, more strategic gambit. This idea that he's simply lying low so he can fight back against the system. If you're not willing to put something as pitiful as your YouTube channel at stake, when the majority of your income from your YouTube channel, or even a significant portion, I have to question your integrity. I mean, I don't do that often to people who aren't public officials or members of the media, the mainstream media. But I have to do it. I have to question your integrity. If you're to make that small sacrifice, what makes me believe that you would sacrifice anything, really, when the time came to it? And that was another recurring theme during the debate. This idea that it's never going to get to that point. No one's going to be imprisoned. No one's going to be put to death for vaccine refusal. And as I pointed out during the debate, he has nothing on which to base this assumption. He's simply speculating, and he's using a very questionable frame for this speculation. When we see everything that's happened in the past year and a half, it's yes, Tower Time. It's a debate I did on Monday. It was on a debate with I Hypocrite. So he's using this. He's employing the cynical perspective, but the cynicism is directed at a government that's already committed just already committed breaches of our civil rights that would have been unfathomable. Excuse me, just a little over a year ago or a year and a half ago, when this crisis began. So back in early 2020, no one, even the most paranoid observer, would have never suspected that the CDC would be entrusted with seizing property. They wouldn't have thought that you would be essentially locked inside of your homes, denied access to your job. They all of the things that we've seen unfold over the past 2 years would have been beyond the ken of anyone but the most paranoid observer, or even I, who am very skeptical and cynical about government actions, who don't trust them to do anything, wouldn't have conceived of a time where have this much control of your life. And someone made an observation in juxtaposing this against the post 9/11 restrictions, things like the Patriot Act, the restrictions that were imposed on airlines with the creation of the TSA, and these significant diminution of civil liberties in post 9/11 America. But those pale in comparison to what we've seen in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. That would never happen. His argument was not an argument. It was basically demand that we ignore everything that's happened over the past 2 years and not extrapolate some very reasonable things, namely that the government is going to continue to crack down on. And he said that even as there are op-eds and there are articles in very popular progressive news magazines, mandatory vaccination, Vox published a piece a few months ago which asserted that mandatory vaccinations on a state and a municipal level were legal. And even though vaccinations on a federal level were questionable, the legality of it was questionable, they would still be a good thing. And this is the mindset of the left. Even the American Civil Liberties Union, which has, to all intents and purposes, become a Democratic Party, it's basically become an adjunct of the Democratic Party. They came out with an op-ed saying that lockdowns and stripping civil liberties of people who refused to be vaccinated, that was pro civil liberties, that all of the things we're witnessing right now, these are actually going to contribute to us having more freedom. So they're saying that their op-ed in the New York Times, the gist of it was less freedom equals more freedom. It was it was a very Nazi-ish, if I'm not being too hyperbolic there. That's something else that really it's stunning when you actually critically examine the arguments that he made during this debate. It's really piffle. It's not. I'm but my main takeaway here is that his the the um the perspective he was putting forward, and which he elaborated upon later on Twitter, it's not defensible. It would have been defensible if he were it might have been defensible if you were making a sacrifice that was of any import, but sacrificing your YouTube channel, if you're not willing to do that, then I really I have I have doubts about your integrity, your willingness to sacrifice anything, and the idea that everyone thinks along these lines, that no one's willing to sacrifice something of consequence, is simply not wrong, and it's demonstrated by all of the people willing to give up their jobs. These are people who are married, who have spouses, who have children, some of them many children, and there are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of these people. We don't fully know yet, because a lot enforced. A lot of them are still undergoing litigation. I mean, thankfully, the mandate for healthcare workers has been enjoined temporarily by a judge in New York, and we'll see what the progress on that is. But a lot of these haven't been enforced, so we haven't seen how many people are willing to sacrifice. I think it was Vox Day who said that he was actually surprised that 25 to 30% of the population, there was that large, willing to sacrifice. But Hypocrite doesn't even think it's 5% of the population. He thinks everyone is uh, everyone's principles are as malleable as his and I won't even say his principles, his ostensible commitment to freedom of choice, to individuality. So to impeach by well, this is just an aside to the main topic, but yeah, if there were people pursuing the 27th Amendment in the case of President Trump, someone who was who able president, as he said, and yet we have a president who's non-compos mentis, who is not there at all, and yet no one seems to care. No one seems to care about the fact that he's arrogating to himself the powers of a literal fascist dictator. Yeah, it's projection, and defense, and it goes back to one of my initial observations about his first video, his pro-vaccine video. I think the second part of his video was done because he perceives, if he had come forward and said, just made an honest statement saying the government is coercing me into doing this in order to see my children, I don't think he would have received nearly the backlash that he's receiving. But he thought by doing that, he would be perceived as cowardly, as unprincipled. So he goes, he proceeds to make the second part of the video, which is essentially a regurgitation of mainstream media talking points, of CDC talking points, of the talking points of people who have no credibility in organizations that have no credibility, that are are we being disrupted? I'm criticizing the Pope of vaccines and experiencing that's probably a coincidence, but yeah, it's buffering. I see too. Well, I don't see it. It came up on my screen. The minute I start talking about Anthony Fauci, the stream started buffering. So can you guys hear me? Can you guys am I cut off? Just give me some feedback so I can continue. Otherwise, I'll just okay. All right. So we're back. speaking of paranoia, that would be hilarious. That's kind of I start talking about Anthony Fauci in the street. No, you have to shut him off. We can't have that. We can't have someone we can't have someone gainsaying the noble Fauci. That's kind of funny, but getting back to my point, yeah. I mean, I think he did the second part of his video because he thought if he had just said, I'm being coerced into this and I don't have the resolution to stand on my principles, if it means I'm sacrificing something of great importance to me, he thought that would mean he was cowardly. He wanted to come off as a macho sort of. He wanted to come off as someone with integrity. So he came up with, the next 8 or 9 minutes of his video, which is basically repeating all of these media talking points related to the vaccine. And he also, another aspect of the debate was interesting, is that he attacked me. He became very indignant for me describing his fear as irrational. And then later on in the by anxiety to get this vaccine. So it wasn't just a rational analysis of the statistics relating to his age cohort and his likelihood of contracting COVID. He said point blank, this is relieves my anxiety. And as I said, I'm not going to criticize anyone for getting this vaccine if it eases their mind. If the reason you're getting the vaccine is simply because you're riddled with anxiety and this will relieve that anxiety, I'm not going to criticize someone for that. Everyone has irrational fears. I know I do, and I'm sure everyone watching this stream has irrational fears. That's an aspect of our humanity, having irrational fears about things. And I don't think anyone should be attacked because they succumb to those fears. Yet you can't simultaneously maintain that you're a rational arbiter of these facts, and that's the reason you're getting the vaccine. While at the same time saying, yes, I have all of these anxieties about it, and that's why I'm getting the vaccine. They're mutually contradictory. So, I mean, that's another thing. Other minor details that I could probably bring up. The fact he cited the Alabama ICU case where a man was in the ICU in an Alabama hospital and they couldn't treat him, and they called 254 hospitals with ICUs that said they were full. And he rattled that off, a case that had just happened, which I hadn't heard of. He rattled that off as if this was a man experiencing cardiac arrest, an ordinary heart attack, and there were just so many ICUs that were flooded that he couldn't go there. And of course, that's not what happened. This was a man who had a stroke, who had a chronic condition that needed a certain level of expertise and a certain level of care. So he couldn't. So in a rural hospital, yes, it's difficult or impossible if that hospital is filled up, which is often the case, to minister that care to that person. So this situation would have occurred in a big city as well. Liaising with a hospital that has the very that meets the very specific parameters of needs expert care, that's very difficult. And sometimes you have tragic circumstances like this that occur. But the way he framed it as an ordinary person just has an ordinary heart attack and is turned down by hundreds of ICUs was simply not the case. I mean, there are some other issues that I had with the debate, but those are just the main points I wanted to emphasize. And thanks for everyone who watched the debate. For the people who, I'm sure some people will watch it because of this video. I think it's a good. It's worth watching, not because I had some excellent performance, just because I think it illustrates the the way the truth is being manipulated, particularly by people who support this vaccine mandate, these punitive measures that strip away people's freedoms in order to achieve their end goal. Thanks, Alejandro. So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts. I try to make it brief, and I will see you all next time.